Welcome back to Break of Throw. I'm here for a very special episode with the former Premier League champion, Glenn Durrant, current darts coach as well, Glenn. I kind of want to start in that area, start a bit generic. How important is it for a professional, but even a semi-professional, to understand the kind of dynamics of their throws?
It doesn't mean by being a professional dart player that I'm going to be a better coach than a non-professional player. I'd like to say that, but I've been very diligent. I've worked very hard in assessing throws. Part of my downfall as well was trying to understand the methods of where it sort of went wrong. And that sort of then led to really enjoying helping and supporting others, because I feel I've been at the very highs with my throw. And I've also felt like I've almost got a little bit of dartitis and that fear of throwing the dart. And from there, I just went into dart coaching, which I thought I just sat as a little bit of a hobby. The USP is there as the Premier League champion, a 3-time Lakeside champion. But I want to be a great coach. There was once upon a time in my life I wanted to be the best dart player in the world. Right now, I want to be the best dart coach in the world.
Would you say it's kind of striking that balance between knowing where you can improve and how your dart's going, so that when there's an issue, you can kind of address it, but not overthinking it to the point where all you think about on every throw is technique, technique, technique?
The coach can think technique, technique, technique. The coach can analyse where the dart is landing. If the player is doing that, it's dangerous. A player has just got to see the target area. They have just got to have that total focus when they're thinking of absolutely nothing over my shoulder. It's a dangerous, dangerous place as a dart player when you're processing and analysing your throw when you're on the hockey. I don't recommend that.
Well, we're going to pick your coaching brain today because we've got Steve Beaton and Mervyn King as the two players we'll be taking a look at today. Two legends of the game, Glenn.
Both with longevity. So I think I've got an easier job than most, Steve, because their throws, they've been at the top of the game a long time. So I think I've got away with it here. I think both of these throws are very, very enjoyable.
Well, let's start with Steve Beaton. We can take a look here. It's all about his hockey position in this first clip. What stands out to you there, Glenn?
Simplicity. His pre-throw routine is simple. He doesn't give much away before he throws the dart. There's not an awful lot of thinking and going on there. The whole thing is just so simple but so effective. And a throw I use so much when showing other people how to throw a dart. I'm a huge fan of the way that he throws that dart.
Obviously, a little bit later, we'll take a look at Mervyn King and where he stands on the hockey. But as a player, how do you kind of understand where the best place is to stand on the hockey?
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. And I would expect if you did come to see me for a dart coaching session, that if you've had that little bit of experience, that you'll stand far left to the hockey, like Merv King, that you've stood far right, like Stephen Bunting. But as a coach, I do promote, certainly to young players or players who just want to learn the fundamentals of their throw, to try to throw as central as possible.
Well, if you give me mates rates, then who knows? So if we take a look at this, Glenn, this is Steve's throw with a multitude of different angles. And people say it's one of the smoothest, most natural throws in the game. What do you think here?
Finesse, elegance, and when you're standing behind him, you're thinking how ridiculously easy it is to throw a dart. Some of us get on their hockey, and like we touched on earlier, there's things going through their mind where 7'9" and 3/4 can feel a long distance. For Steve, I just see elegance. He's tall. He uses that little forward elevation that he has there. Simplicity is key.
For the first two darts specifically, there is really not much movement. And in the last one, he kind of walks a little bit. But you get used to that a little bit as a player sometimes, don't you?
Well, that's the word rhythm. But as a coach, I like every dart to be thrown exactly the same. But it would be difficult if I was trying to say that to Steve, who's got all the experience in the world. But if a young player was coming to see me, then I would like to see them on their last dart not walk. But you can see that, you see it with Dave Chisnell, we see it with John Henderson, we do it with Richie Burnett. I mean, everyone's got their quirks. But as a coach, I try to portray to not walk on that last dart. But who am I to say that to Steve Beaton, who's got arguably one of the great throws of all time?
Obviously, he's been in the game a long time as well. Would you say that that throw has really changed since the start, to be honest?
I would have said no in your answer, but I did an exhibition with him in Germany 14, 15 months ago, and he was working on his throw then. Now, that could be based on the fact that he was looking at retirement. Can he have a look to try and find that 1-2% different to keep his tour card, keep himself going? I was amazed. I mean, we know that he's got a very quick, and that's a great angle that I'm seeing on that side there, because Steve Beaton is one of the few players, Nathan Aspinall being another, where he's not actually holding the dart. He's holding right at the back so far that he's actually thrown from the stem, giving him that that trajectory that he really likes, and that traditional landing in of the board, which we'll see the majority there. But if we look very, very closely, I mean, you've got that beautiful rhythm there. You've got that. How much do I talk about elbow? No lift whatsoever. That stunning follow through we've talked about, and as you see it in slow motion, it's just getting more beautiful every time I see it. But the quirkiness of Steve Beaton's throw is he just pulls it right to that right eye there that we can see there. One, the simplicity, but the fact that he's holding from the stem. And one of the few players who uses the pair flight. Not many people use that pair flight. And for someone who did use the pair flight, I always think when you're throwing straight, if your alignment is good, then it doesn't give much away, the pair flight. So he's always sort of gone old school with that flight setup. So the throw hasn't changed, the setup hasn't changed, equals longevity.
How do you think finding out that you kind of start to grip it on the stem comes about? Because obviously in darts you're kind of told, obviously, hold the dart, and the stem's kind of just an addition onto the dart, and you're not obviously recommended to hold it there. But how do you actually find out that it suits you better to hold it that far back?
Well, I'd like to think it's how you first hold that dart. And when I started first coaching, pretty much everybody was leaving with a throw that I like, that I see as being a fantastic throw. And it's only maybe in like 12 months into my coaching did I realise that for some reason Steve holds the stem. I don't know if he used to hold a very, he had a really small fat dart where he's pretty much his fingers are going to end up on the stem, but for whatever reason, that's his quirk. And I think as a coach, you've got to nurture that rather than then trying to make him throw from the barrel like everybody else does. And like I said, it gives that trajectory that he's looking for, because the closer down, if I moved his fingers and he's virtually touching the point, that's when you'll see a dart understack. So the Phil Taylor's got a totally different grip, uses totally different fingers, but that angle there, look where the flight is, look where the point is, almost not going to the same, but that 3/4 angle. Look at the elevation of that wrist there. That is why Steve Beaton has got that throw that most professionals looked and said, if I could have anybody's throw, it would be Steve Beaton's.
It's interesting you mentioned about the pear-shaped flight as well. Does kind of holding the stem kind of mean that he doesn't have much room to try new things? Because obviously I know I've seen you've tried molded systems as of late. With someone like Steve, does he really have the opportunity to change his setup that much based on how he throws it?
Well, number one, to another player, it's seen as a weakness as well. I think if Steve Beaton walked in and he was using a standard flight, a molded setup, you would think, what? I think Steve's had this. He's been, blessed with this wonderful throw, and sometimes it's as a dart player, you think, I wonder if I just put a longer point in. I wonder if I start going 2 grams heavier. I wonder if I use the molded setup. But from experience now, when I look back, that's when I was at my lowest. And I think I was demonstrating weakness there. So I think Steve has realised he's a world champion. He's had how many world championships consecutively. Don't change too much there. Maybe it was just a little bit of the mindset. Maybe it was just a little bit of age catching up as well. That fire in the belly that he needs. But as I look over again, that stance, that balance, that posture, that elbow, that follow through, that elevation of the wrist, that dart, the quirkiness of holding the stem. If you put all that into the mixing point, that's why you've got someone who's had the career of Steve Beaton.
Exactly, and it kind of indicates that potentially he can still go on to play for a lot longer because nothing has really changed.
Absolutely, and like I say, I was a player who had quite a manufactured throw. I sort of built my throw around years of experience. I have a feeling with Steve Beaton, when he first picked the dart up, that's how he threw it.
So if you could sum up Steve Beaton's throw in just 3 words, Glenn, what would it be?
Beautiful, simplistic, elegance.
Well, there you go. One of the most elegant throws in the game. And after the break, we'll be taking a look at Mervyn King. Welcome back to Break of Throw. Before the break, we had a look at Steve Beaton, one of the greatest throws in the game. And now we're going to have a look at Mervyn King, Glenn. What do you think about Mervyn straight off the bat in terms of throw and technique?
Well, let me say, I said at the beginning of the show that the fact that I got lucky with 2 throws, because we're now looking at Merv King, another player with 20, 30 years at the top of the game. So something he is doing right is clearly, and a lot of that is linked to the throw. But first and foremost, on that picture that we're looking at there, anyone looking at there, and I've heard people say it, why does Merv King stand so far left of the hockey? But look at that right arm. Look at that shoulder as he comes. Yes, he moves to the left, but look at the position of the right shoulder and the right. It's not a far away from centre of the hockey at that point. You know, I don't think it's over-exaggerated compared to a Stephen Bunting who stands far right, but he's right-handed. So he's then going even further away from the dartboard. And Merv King has worked on that throw strategically. He has worked on to get the best out of what he's got. So that issue of the left, just remind yourself where the throwing arm is. It's not as far away from centre as people think.
Obviously, with Beaton, he goes down the middle, and that is kind of perceived as the natural thing to do in darts. So if you're Mervyn King, how do you realise that the more you stand to the left, the more it's starting to benefit your throw?
You've just got to listen. I mean, as a dart player with that year's experience, again, he'll have stood there on the left. He'll have stood there on the right over the years, because we all look for change. We all look for that extra 1%. I wonder if I go central. He didn't like it. He doesn't like to throw from the centre of the hockey. He's at his favourite point and is at his best when he's on the left-hand side. The stories, we use Stephen Bunting again, he stands far right because when he first started the game, he played in the kitchen, couldn't stand to the left because that's where the wall was. So we go right back to the beginning of when he throws the dart. So all these experienced players, they're not just throwing the left and they've never tried centre or right. He'll have done that. And when Mervyn King is at his best, he's in that position that he's in there right now. And it's worked wonders for him, and no wonder he's been at the top of the game for so long.
That's actually a really interesting point, because now we have darts academies and stuff like that. So when you go up to the hockey, you can go exactly where you want. You have that chance to kind of experiment. But like you're saying, for kind of the older players coming up, when they went through the pub and stuff like that, you can go to a pub and you can literally have no room whatsoever apart from dead centre of a hockey. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone from Teesside watching this, you would go to the Woodman Arms in Normanby and you couldn't stand to anywhere right of the board. You know, you had to stand central. And like I say, the stories of people, you know, when I said when you first throw a dart is really important, and like I said, you know, for some players, they didn't have the luxury of standing to the left, they didn't have the luxury of standing to the right, and that can just sort of stay with you going forward, and I think that's a good thing. But again, another great angle there of Merv King and the side on view, but coming from that angle of the left, just remind yourself where they're right before we then get into what I think is a crucial part of the throw, and that's his grip.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the grip and the follow-through here, Glenn. Obviously, we see the side and angle. Mervyn's been here and he's kind of spoke about how dartitis and tennis elbow have kind of shaped what his throws become today.
I can see the tennis elbow. For the first time today, I didn't know about the dartitis. I've studied his career from a long time, because you may laugh here, but when I was practicing, as you know, when I was going through the ranks in the BDO, I used to pretend I was Gary Anderson. I used to pretend I was Merv King. You know, I used to love that flick of the dart, which I'm going to come to now. Now, he uses a dart which is iconic to him, and they've got those scallops in there. It's a pretty funny old dart that he uses. I'm trying to probably think of the right word, but those scallops that he uses are there for a reason. You know, the first 2 scallops are there because of the feel of the dart, and the final scallop, as you get closer to the point, is because that's the balance of the dart that he wants. But the crucial part of this episode of Merv King is the fact that strategically he's looked at the way a gun has been and a bullet has been fired, and the rifling of a gun. When you fire a gun, it then hits the bullet, and the bullet will spin in the air to get that projected nice and straight. So he's looked at, we've heard about Phil Taylor, the way he set up this very small flight because of a submarine. in relation to Merv King, he's looked at the way a gun has been fired in the way he comes out with a spin, hence the reason he brings that dart back, and you can see him spin the dart and releases the dart at that point. So when you add in the scallops on the dart, the spin, the way he studied the fact that the way a gun has been rifled, and then I can see for the first time with the follow through of the arm, because until I see that very close up there, you can see he doesn't fully extend. Neither does Johnny Clayton, neither does Gabriel Clemens, neither does Raymond van Barneveld, neither does Chizzy, because there's this obsession with players that they come to see that you think they have to finish with that straight arm. And you can see there, when you see the final outcome of the throw of Merv King, that the follow-through isn't totally straight there. So, left-hand side, flick of the wrist, and you can see there, you can see the way that the release of the dart, you can see the potential tennis elbow, because it's not as smooth, it's not as elegant, it's not thrown with finesse like Steve Beaton. But he has studied that to get the best out of himself for over 20, 30 years. Spin, follow through. And let me tell you, in 2021, January 2021, I played him at the Masters, and I honestly believe that Merv King was the best player in the world at that point. He was playing sensational darts, and he went through a phase which he might have thought his better days were behind him. And when I studied his throw this morning, going back to when he was playing in Lakeside and World Masters, that throw hasn't changed an awful lot, and neither has Steve Beaton's.
The adaptability is actually almost considered a skill, really, isn't it? Because you mentioned Richie Burnett earlier, and the reason Richie throws how he does is also to battle dartitis. How impressive is it to take what would be your natural throw and then essentially break it down and come back again because of these issues?
But he may not know that he's changed that throw, because we evolve. We evolve, and the best players probably don't study their form. Michael van Gerwen's throw is unrecognisable from 2016. There's only the Steve Beatons of this world, the Gary Andersons, where you can probably look 10 years ago at their throw and it's exactly the same. Most players' throws change. Now, if you ask Merv King, he's probably thinking in his mind that he's thrown exactly like he was when he was winning World Masters, when he was playing in Lakeside, when he was playing at Alexander Palace, when he was at the top of his form early 2021. I mean, he's had an incredible CV. Some of the games, the facial mannerisms when he plays, he's such a character. But I think when it comes to his throw, I think it's just evolved naturally. We get older, and I think that is part of that.
With this clip here, Glenn, Mervyn starts obviously where you'd expect, on the left for him, but then he moves all the way over to the right to kind of get around his dart. That understanding of how your dart goes in the board is absolutely crucial. No matter even if you stand ridiculously over to the left or ridiculously over to the right, sometimes you're going to be forced to move, aren't you?
Yeah. And I often say that with Stephen Bunting again, when he goes from the right to the centre, he doesn't often miss. So part of my brain's like, stand more centrally. But, as one of the best players in the world right now, he would probably disagree. And, of course, you use the word adaptability, and part of throwing it as you're going to manoeuvre yourself around the hockey there. But his first and foremost, his favourite darts from that left-hand side there. And I wouldn't say it's a manufactured throw, but talking to him about when he releases the dart, talking about the gun, talking about the bullet, the spin of that dart for it to go straight, he's looked into it. He has tried to investigate and look into his throw, what's going to get the best out of him. And it was intriguing chatting with him about his throw, because, like I mentioned earlier, he has one of those throws where I used to want to throw like him. That spin, that throw, that accuracy, that precision. And again, that's very similar to like Steve Beaton, why he's been at the top of the game for so long.
I'd like to speak to you actually about how do you understand as a player that your data needs a drastic change? So, for example, Connor Scott, who's played here, Simon Whitlock. Simon Whitlock changes his equipment all the time, which probably isn't recommended. But they both kind of use that dart where the dart has kind of ended up, like I say, got a scallop kind of in the middle. How do you understand as a darts player that that's what you need? Because it's not traditional at all, is it?
Well, I don't understand it, first of all, because I'm pretty old school in a sense that if I wanted to get better as a dart player, my philosophy was, if I hit a 180 with that set of darts, my job is then to hit more 180s with them, more consistency. I looked at more technique, but then Peter Wright came along. And Peter Wright has a philosophy where he'll pick up the worst dart he's feeling with because it makes him try harder. And I'd never thought of it like that. And as a dart player, when things aren't really going your way, you then start thinking, I wonder if I put a longer pointer in. I wonder if I go fat barrel, small barrel, big flight, small flight, pair flight, and so many things start going in your mind because you're looking for an instant answer. And we've seen it with the Whitlocks, the Wrights, where the change in dart, so much. But from me, my psychology of it is just a little bit different. I'd want to tweak my technique with the darts that's got me to the best in the world, to 30 years at the top of the game, rather than looking at something different. When I go back now to my end of my career and my time on the seniors, I was dabbling. I was throwing with flights not associated with me, darts that didn't belong to me. A lot of that was because I'd lost the fire in the belly. I was panicking. I could see, I wonder if I try these, will my whole career go back to where it once was? I was in panic mode. I think for a lot of these professionals, personally, just look at tweaking things, but maybe consider a little style of a changing on the hockey, your stance, maybe grip just a little bit softer, because tension and anxiety when you're throwing the dart is often linked to poor form as well. And when people change darts on that such a regular basis, I think it's a sign of weakness and a little bit of panic.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because obviously Mervyn drops off the tour and potentially could have gone down that route where he's thinking, well, how come that's happened? I've been at the top of my game for how many years, and then all of a sudden I'm off the tour. But as we can see, he hasn't really changed much of his setup. He might make an odd change to the flight or something like that, but generally speaking, it's exactly the same as it has been.
Matt, but his eyes are different, he's older, the body feels different. You can, listen, when I was Connor Scott's age, he practices 8 hours a day, one of the hardest working dart players, next day feels exactly the same. If I practiced 8 hours, if Mervyn King practiced 8 hours, if Steve Beaton practiced 8 hours, they would know the next day. Your body changes, your throw evolves, and that's why I admire the fact that these players who stay at the top of the game, James Wade, you look at his throw 20 years ago, it's exactly the same. So there's a common denominator there that if your throw doesn't change too much, you will get longevity.
You mentioned there, actually, that as Mervyn gets older, for example, he probably won't be able to practice as much, but he is known kind of being the person who turns up first at every event. How long can that go on for?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the funniest videos I've watched where he's attending. I think he's on at 10 o'clock in the morning for the UK Open, and there's a video done where he's setting off the night before to go into the venue. I mean, we heard the Luke Little and Luke Humphreys World Cup pairs this week, where Luke Humphreys is 4.5 hours before, Luke Little likes 2 hours. Mervyn King was always first in the venue. Mervyn King used to get there 7 to 8 hours before his game. So if he was playing on a night session, he'd be there with the afternoon session players. He's a one-off in that. I can't think of many other players. Martin Adams, Wolfie liked to get to a venue very early. Both practice partners together in the old BDO days as well. So maybe that's come from that, yeah. But he thinks he gets himself right by being in the venue that long. Who am I to doubt that?
Finally, with Mervyn, 3 words to describe the throw. What would they be?
Left-sided? No. Quirky darts, strategic.
Well, there you go. Glenn Durrant giving all the info on Mervyn King and Steve Beaton on this episode of Break a Throw. Make sure you stay tuned to Pluto TV to see more great breakdowns of great players.